My name's Marc Garrett, and I'm the curator of Monsters of the Machine, Frankenstein in the 21st century. The idea came across from, well, I've been a great fan of Mary Shelley for years, one of my favourite writers. And also I'm an artist myself and part of an art organisation called Fairfield, but also involved with technology. I'm really interested in art that answers difficult questions, but also asks difficult questions about contemporary life. This exhibition is about contemporary life, and it's about, so all the artists in this exhibition, I view them as if they've got Mary Shelley inside them, asking the same questions of what she would be asking right now if she was alive today, about climate change, about data surveillance, about feminist culture and patriarchal culture, about human identity, and a lot of the questions that everyone's asking right now about the economy and about indigenous culture as well. Indigenous culture are asking similar questions as people that are in, say, so-called first world culture. They're asking the same questions. Whether it's in technology or not in technology, it's being expressed the same way. It's just that traditional art culture is not very good at representing that. But that's changing. And there's a lot of, and that's because artists are able to work with technology to be able to deal with the big ideas of today that they haven't been able to. Art has been failing to answer those questions, but it's dealing with them now. Contemporary artists, I think, are showing the way for people that work with technology and politics and in kind of contemporary cultural issues. They open a door in a different way in how we can view context that doesn't necessarily have to be oppositional. And so it opens up a part of the world that people kind of would feel uncomfortable to have conversations with, even with their family or with their friends. And that's part of what people have been calling, in parallel to the Anthropocene, which is about the change of climate that man-made has kind of imposed on the planet since, well, before the Industrial Revolution. So what's important about this exhibition is not just Mary Shelley, but it's also Mary Shelley's mother, who wrote the first feminist book called A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. The other thing that's important is that she wrote that against Edmund Burke, who was against the French Revolution. And Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley's mum, was pro the revolution, but a critique of Rousseau against the masculinity of revolution. And that came out in Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein. Frankenstein was about a critique of her own father, but also a critique of the patriarchal revolution, which was a revolution for men and not for everyone. This exhibition that ties it all together is the fact there's about 65% women that are showing their work in the exhibition. And what's also important is that they're dealing with the same issues now as Mary Shelley was then, and her mum was, which is like the control where patriarch dominates the narrative of culture, institutionally systemic, and in a way this show is the spirit of enlightenment, but also it's the spirit of the Anthropocene with a contemporary academic thinker like Donna Haraway, who's also thinking about very similar issues, because she also wrote the Cyborg Manifesto, and that was about women mutating and claiming their own identity, where they can reshape their own context on their own terms and not on their father, the state, or in scientific terms of so-called objectiveness. So the important thing that's significant about Mary Shelley is Frankenstein, which is then it was called the modern Prometheus. And it's about man's control over nature and technology and how we can change it and adapt it according to our needs. And so we have control of the materiality of nature. Lynn Hirschman Leeson, which I'm in the room of Lynn Hirschman Leeson, and the important thing to realise Lynn Hirschman Leeson's work is all her work is engaging in mutating of nature and technology, and a lot of her work involves biohacking, like the nose here, which is being grown from some material, and she's kept that as a kind of monument of a genetically grown nose from a petri dish. Some of the images, the wallpaper images, are actually genetically painted and modified fruits and animals, and which is they're Frankensteins, but they're kind of like vegetable Frankensteins and animal Frankensteins, and as in Frankenstein the monster. And so in this sense, so for instance, in science, the man that changes nature is Frankenstein the doctor, and the result of it is the monster. And that's kind of what this work kind of represents. And so the other question is who is the monster? You know, is Frankenstein the doctor the monster? And who he has experimented on and mutated, are they just victims, and is it right that we call them monsters? So this is a piece by Art is Open Source, who are a group, like a design group, but they're also hackers as well. So they kind of do very adventurous artworks around art and design and hacking culture. And they hack everyday life and in a kind of very kind of positive way. And I think the important thing about Art is Open Source is that this piece, La Cura, is a perfect representation of kind of monsters in the machine, but engaging in something very fundamental, but it's a very positive approach towards something that's fundamental. And what we mean by this is because La Cura, this piece of work, is based on Salvatore Iaconesi's tumour that he had when he went to a doctor, and the problem was that he had a brain tumour and the data was owned by the doctors. And so Iaconesi decided to open source his data so other doctors could actually have access to that data, so he could find a cure for the tumour, which at that time they could not. And so the other half of Oriana Pasecchi, who's the other member of Art is Open Source, collaborated with Salvatore to find a cure, but it wasn't just them, because they collaborated with thousands of people through the internet to also share. This included many doctors around the world that are also observing the data of that tumour, but there's also other people that were sending good wishes and like get well postcards in a way, which is what's here, and what's important is it represents a positive form of human mutation through technology with open source culture. And what that means also is that the data that's normally privatised by National Health Service, which is the way it's going now, is actually not the way forward. If you open source the data through National Health Service, more people can be cured. That's the message of this piece. This is a piece by Joanna Mole and Cedric Parizeau, and it's called The Virtual Watchers. The piece is especially poignant today because of the Trump election in America, because this website was put up around 2010, and Joanna Mullen-Perry, they both hacked into the website account and copied all the data of this Facebook group, whose specific purpose was to survey, act as like a group of surveillance operators to see how many Mexicans were crossing over into the American border from Mexico. And so they'll have all these webcams up and they'll be watching Mexicans, immigrants crossing the border, and then they will contact the authorities to get them arrested. And all the people's images, this is all their faces. As you can see, there's slits on their eyes, so you can't recognize them thoroughly. And so this is a kind of, you click on the images to find out their comments about when, and their videos, and there's all kinds of things about how they surveyed people crossing the border. And it's a good example of how art and technology and surveillance connect together to represent something that's culturally significant, and how people look at this piece of work is important, because they can put themselves as being surveyed by this Facebook group and see what they feel about that. So this is a real-time live internet artwork that's been created by Guido Segni, and it's called A Quiet Desert Failure. And what's so interesting about this piece is kind of positive and negative. So in relation to technology being invented by Dr. Frankenstein, metaphorically and also physically, the interesting thing here is that you've got Google Earth. So each segment here is loaded up onto a server around the world through Google Earth every 30 minutes. And that's a capture of the desert. And not just that, the irony, or the comedy in Greek terms, is that at the same time that Google Earth is taking a beautiful picture of the desert, the actual server farms at the same time are burning up and creating more desert in regards to climate change. It's poetic, it's evil, it's interesting, and that's another kind of play that this artist has decided to kind of propose. This exhibition represents, I would say, over 200 years of ideas as post-Enlightenment. And so it's the exhibition is about enlightenment, self-education, learning, and empowering oneself through art, but also using technology as well, and science.